Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of On the Whistle, where we're going to talk about Sunderland 2, Sheffield United 1, a massive night, I think it's fair to say, in Sunderland season. But I just wanted to start by wishing you and your loved ones all a very, very happy new year. Hopefully 2025 is a peaceful and fulfilling year for all of you. I thought it was a huge win for Sunderland last night. I think when you looked at the table coming into the game, off the back of conceding late at Blackburn and Stoke, I think Leeds had stretched their lead out to 7 points going into the New Year's Day's fixtures. You looked at Sheffield United, who I think had a 5-point advantage going into the game. I think if Sunderland had lost last night particularly, it would have been very, very difficult to see them overhauling those three teams above them. And then with Leeds and Burnley dropping points in the 3 o'clock fixtures, it felt like a real opportunity for Sunderland. Both teams really heavily impacted by injuries at the moment. I think you could see that at times in the game. But I think for the Sunderland team, with all the players that are missing, to go and win the game, I think was a huge result, and I think both Régis Lebris and his players deserve a huge amount of credit. Spoke about it with James. Hopefully you'll have watched our sort of instant reaction video from the press box last night. But I thought the win was based on a really brave decision from Lebris really. And two aspects of it. One was in his press conference ahead of this game. He was asked about Ailish and whether he would potentially take him out of the team after those couple of quite costly misses against Blackburn and Stoke. Lebris was unusually animated and unusually strong. He's not a very emotive person in his response, saying how important it was to back young players, how important it was to sort of not get too sucked into, especially up front and in goal, which he says are the two hardest positions on the pitch where mistakes are magnified, not to get too carried away. Made it very clear that he was going to pick Meander and that he trusted him. I thought that was a real obvious public showing of faith in Meander, and he was of course totally rewarded with Meander's excellent performance throughout the game. It was also an excellent decision to change formation a little bit. It would have been very easy for him to stick with his kind of settled and trusted formula, move Ailish into a central area and play Meander again off the left. But I think we've seen at times in recent weeks that it's not a position Meander's comfortable in. A big risk to essentially potentially give Sheffield United control of the midfield by taking a player out there and putting another player up front. But I thought it was a game plan that worked perfectly. A lot of credit has to go to Dan Neil and Joe Bellingham, because I think when you play any time in the modern game where you play with a two-man midfield, you ask them to do a huge amount of running and you put them under a lot of pressure to win their duels. And then you sort of magnify that when you're playing against a team of Sheffield United's quality. So I think for those two to put in the performance that they did was a big bedrock of what the other players elsewhere on the pitch were going to do. Did Sunderland deserve the win? I think they did just about. I think Chris Wilder was interesting after the game. He praised Sunderland for two aspects of the game. One, the way they punished Sheffield United's sloppiness in possession and countered in the first half, and also the way they defended later on. He did say as well that he felt that if maybe some Sunderland fans and some people at Sunderland felt they maybe should have got more from the return fixture at Bramall Lane, which I definitely agree with, then he maybe felt that their pressure in the second half deserved a point. I can see where he's coming from. I thought it was a really, really tight game. The second half, I felt like it was a bit of a sort of high wire act. Sheffield United looked dangerous, of course. They had so much ball, so much territory, so many crosses into the box. You felt like they could get that goal at any time. But I always actually felt that Sunderland could score on the break as well. And I felt that in a strange kind of way, Sunderland were happy with where the game was, because there was so much space on the break. And I think they always felt that they could go and finish it off. As it happened, neither team was able to get the goal. So yeah, a tight game. It was one that could have gone either way, but I do think that Sunderland's game plan was perfect, really. And I think they just about deserved the win, and maybe they were due a little bit of luck that sort of deserted them in recent weeks. So a really big night in the Sunderland season, and hopefully something they can go and kick on from. Now, as you know, we take your questions and comments on the whistle, so I'm going to go through them now. And I'm going to start with something that so many of you asked about, so I'm just going to put your questions into one. I'll read through them now and we'll have a little discussion about it. And that was the change of formation last night. So Peter says, 2 up front, a momentary response to injuries and opposition, or something to expect often. Zeus Steelix says, what was RLB's thinking about behind the tactical change in this game? 4-4-2 worked brilliantly, and both Meander and Isidore caused Sheffield United all sorts of problems. Dancing Radio says, is 4-4-2 the best formation as per Mike Bassett? Always love a Mike Bassett reference on the whistle. Righty214 says, is 4-4-2 the way forward? And then Max Steele also says, Phil, you mentioned in a previous episode how you felt RLB might not trust Adil Aoushi centrally. Do you think that may have been the reason for a switch in formation, or can we expect to have 2 up front as a backup plan going forward? So we spoke to Lebris after the game on his post-match press conference about how he came up with this strategy. I think it was based first and foremost on the fact that he He knew that Sheffield United were going to have a lot of the ball. I think you look at Sheffield United's midfield, they've obviously got a huge amount of talented players in there. And I think he felt that Sunderland's biggest threat in the game was going to be on the break with the pace that they have. And so I think that the 4-4-2 was designed specifically really so that when Sunderland won the ball back, and we saw this a lot, particularly with Dan Neil and Joe Bellingham, then he felt that his best option with the players he had available was to utilise Meenda and Isodor's pace on the break. And I think fair play, because it's not very often that kind of what you have in your head before a game works out pretty much exactly as you hoped it would. But I think we saw from the start, I thought while defensively he was excellent as well. Chris Mepham's work on the ball in the first half was so important to the way that Sunderland attacked Sheffield United. Those little early passes he plays over the top. I thought Sheffield United really struggled to deal with it. Yes, there's a big error for the first goal where Jack Robinson fails to make the clearance. But I think it all stems again from Mepham putting them under pressure and from Isidore and Meenda being in the right position. So in short, I think there was two elements to it. One was that he really felt that Sheffield United could be vulnerable on the break. I do think the other aspect of it was with the players available. So as I explained, I think he basically had two options, which was to move Ailish in field and to move Meenda out wide, or to play Meenda through the middle. I think we've seen enough evidence now that, generally speaking, he doesn't like to play Ailish in central areas. He prefers him out wide. I think he feels that's where, I think Ailish, although we saw in this game, we'll speak about it later, he is a real grafter, and he does get up and down. I think he prefers his slightly more off-the-cuff Maverick style out wide. And I also think he maybe felt that with Meenda, because he was a little bit short of confidence, because he's had a tricky couple of games, I think he just wanted to simplify things from an extent as well. Put him in his favoured position, give him that sort of confidence. And I think that was part of it as well. And I thought that was a really good decision, because it was also a game in which, because Sheffield United had a lot of the ball and a lot of players in front of the ball, there was space for Meenda. And I think what we've seen is that when there's space in the game, space for him to run into, he's an incredibly dangerous player. So I think in short, the 4-4-2 was primarily a response to the players Labrise had available. I think that was the best way he felt he could put out the team, given all the players that were absent. I also think it was a little bit of a strategy specifically designed to play a bit more of a direct and a bit more of a counter-attacking style than we would probably see Sunderland at home. After the game, Labrise did say that, although we couldn't remember the game at the time, there was a game earlier this season where he finished with two up front in a similar kind of shape. And he did say that he liked the feel of it, he liked the look of it, and it was something that thought then was be a bit of a backup plan. Don't forget as well that at the start of pre-season, this is a little bit what the shape looked like, but Jobe was the second striker. It was actually when Alan Brown got injured in the first game of the season and Chris Rigg came in at the starting 11 that Labrise really moved things around a bit and dropped Jobe a bit deeper. So in answer to those of you asking if I think it'll be something we see regularly moving forward, I definitely don't think it's going to be regularly moving forward. I think especially at home, it's going to be rare for someone to have this little possession in games, and I think that'll require a different shape. I think generally speaking, the 4-3-3's worked really well, and I think it's very difficult to imagine Rigg, Jobe or Dan Neil being left out of the side. So I definitely think that 4-3-3 is the template moving forward. I think this was specifically a response to the injuries and the opposition. Having said that, I definitely think it's something in Labrise's mind that is a plan B, if you like. So I wouldn't be surprised if at some stage we see it used again. Realistically, looking ahead to Sunday in the visit of Portsmouth, I'm not expecting any of Sunderland's injured players back for that game. So it might be something that we see again then. That's going to be really interesting, because that is going to be a totally different kind of game. I don't envisage Portsmouth having anywhere near the same level of possession as Sheffield United. I don't envisage them having anywhere near as high a defensive line as Sheffield United did in this game. So that'll be interesting if Sunderland do stick with this formation, which you think Labrise will probably have to. Will we see some of the challenges of playing this way against a bit more of a low block and losing that sort of creative midfielder who can unpick defences a little bit? So that's definitely one to watch. I don't think it's something we can expect to see week in, week out, but it's definitely a plan B, if you like. And I certainly think that although Meenda certainly thrived, I actually think Isidore enjoyed having someone up there with him and not being quite so isolated as we have seen him at times. So, Rob Cronin says, not the most notable takeaway from the game, but worth flagging that Ailish had another good showing in my opinion. He's a battler, but also has a touch of class at times. If he could just be a little bit more consistent, he'd be great. Definitely earned his minutes recently. Shiny Tom also says, great to see Eliza Meenda come good, totally agree. Praise must be given to ideal Ailish performances over the games he's started. I appreciate the pecking order when everyone is fit, etc., but do you think he's shown enough to be retained? So yeah, I thought Ailish had a good game last night, especially in the first half. I think fair play to Ailish. What he has shown is that he will put a big shift in He got up and down that left wing all the time, gave Ailish a lot of defensive support. And ultimately, that's the reason why Ailish has played his way back into contention, I think, is because he's shown that he will put a shift in. You know, I don't think anyone's doubted his creative ability, his ability to pick a pass, play a good cross. And I think the fact that he's shown that he can definitely do the defensive side of the game is why he's back in Labrisse's plans at the moment. I thought he tailed off a little bit in the second half. I don't know whether it was a little bit of fatigue. He's obviously gone from barely playing any football to playing sort of 90 minutes in a matter of days. So I think it was kind of inevitable. He looked to run out a little bit of steam in the second half. I think you could see that in his decision making. But generally speaking, another good performance. As to whether I think he'll be retained, I think it's an interesting one, Tom. I think the crucial thing is that Sunderland don't rush into any decisions. I think realistically now that the transfer window's open, if a team was to come in for, say, Abdullah Bar, maybe even Nazari Rusin, I think you could just accept that they're not in Labrisse's plans. It would probably be the best thing to sort of look to get them a move. I think at the moment, realistically, Sunderland can't afford to let Ailish go. They don't have enough bodies. He's got too important a role in the squad, whether that's from the start or as an impact substitute right now. So I think it's one that Sunderland just have to wait and see how the window develops. Now, as good as Ailish has been, and I think he's shown he can be an option specifically in that left wing position, it might be that by the end of the transfer window, Sunderland have recruited more players in that position. Romain Mundle should be fit and playing again. By the end of January, Tommy Watson won't be far off coming back. Now, in that scenario, we could be back to a position where Ailish is fairly well down the pecking order. In my opinion, in that scenario, it's not fair to ask him to hang around if he's got no chance of game time. A player of his ability deserves to be playing more often, and especially with the graft he's shown recently to get his way back into contention. So I would love to see Ailish stay. But I think it's still potentially going to be the right thing to do to let him go. Having said that, I don't think there's any need to rush into a decision on that one. January's quite a long time. There's a lot of games. I mean, I think that's one where Sunderland should take a breath at the end of the window and work out what's best for all parties. I think he's got an important role to play in the next few weeks, and I think we've seen that he can be trusted to do that, and that's to his credit. Carl Bridgeworth said, do you feel we raise our game against the better sides in the league, or are we better suited to the playing styles? Better sides generally avoid the low block and we have more space to work with. Yeah, I think it's definitely the case. If you speak to pretty much any manager in this division, as I do sort of after all the games and the post-match press conferences, the one thing they all mention about Sunderland is their threat on the counter. Sunderland undoubtedly have a reputation of being one of the best counter-attacking sides in this division. I think we've seen for a long time now that their wide players in particular are such a threat on the break, whether that's Clark and Roberts, whether this year it's Mundle, even Tommy Watson coming into that picture now. It's something they've definitely got a reputation for, and a lot of players thrive on that space. I think sometimes it definitely suits them to play against a high line. I think that's been magnified even more this season by the fact that their centre forward, as we've seen, is someone who loves space to run into. But last night was the perfect game for Isidore. He caused the back four so many problems. So I definitely think that some of them are more suited to playing in these kind of open games, Carl. I agree. I think teams who get up the pitch and have a lot of the ball actually give them a lot of space and a lot of trouble. The one thing I would say is sometimes someone can look really hard work playing against a low block. But to be fair, on the main, their results at home against teams low down in the table this season have been very, very good. So I hope, while it hasn't always looked totally convincing, I think it is definitely something they are slowly developing. But I agree with you totally, Carl. I think all things being equal, this is the kind of game they love. An open game with lots of space. I think the way the squad's designed, it works perfectly. Robert says, is Salis Abdul a figment of our Salis Abdul Samed a figment of our imagination? I can understand everyone's desperate to see Salis Abdul Samed make his debut. Well, the good news is he returned to training last week. He's now in full training, full contact training. So spoken to Labrisse about it. Obviously, we have to, everybody touch wood. Fingers crossed he'll be back playing in the next couple of weeks. I think Sunderland are going to be cautious because it's about 6 months since he played competitive football now, so they do need to be a bit careful. But Labrisse has mentioned the Stoke game in the FA Cup as a possible date for his return. If not, he should be in the squad the week after. So I promise you that the Salis Abdul Samed debut is coming. I know it feels a little bit hard to believe at times, but we are almost there. So, Ross says, were Sheffield United the best team we've seen in the SOL this season? If so, does that make it the best performance in terms of guts of the season? I think there's definitely a strong argument for being the best performance and result of the season, just because of when you look at the players that were missing. I know Sheffield United would say that they have 7 or 8 key players missing as well, and that was definitely a factor. But I think when you look at their starting 11, it was still very, very, very strong, and they brought some good players off the bench as well, especially that first double substitution. So I think in terms of the personnel, I think that probably is Sunderland's best result of the season. I still think Leeds are the best team we've seen. I think they're the team that have exerted the most control over Sunderland and would have seen the game out relatively comfortably if not for that goalkeeping error. For me, Leeds United are still my favourites for the title. I still think they're the best team, all-round team that I've seen this season. But huge credit to Sunderland because their consistency has been really impressive. Even when they haven't played well, they kind of seem to find a way, by and large, to grind out results, pick up points. They're up there on merit now with 24 games into the season. So I think a lot of praise is deserved for Sunderland. Stu says, another game where we didn't really trust his subs, even though some were dead on their feet. I know we've got players coming back, and I know you've done articles about being patient for quality over quantity. But is there a case for a couple early in the window to bolster a threadbare squad? Well, listen, I think the ideal scenario would be to get the business done early. That's always the case. As you mentioned there, Stu, spoke to Lebris about this before the game, and he made very clear that someone would wait. They only want 2 or 3 high-quality additions. And if it means waiting until the back end of the window to enjoy the sort of last segment of the season, that's what they'll do. Obviously, they'll look to get their business done early. At the moment, there doesn't appear to be anything absolutely imminent, but we'll wait and see on that. I think the one thing I would say, Stu, is if you look a little bit at the schedule, there's nobody who can really come in and impact the game on Sunday against Portsmouth. You then got the FA Cup third round next Saturday. So that means it's another 2 weeks really after the Portsmouth game before Sunderland play in the league. In that time, I would expect quite a lot of players to come into contention. Dan Ballard, Chris Rigg, possibly Alan Brown, possibly Romain Mundell. Salih Abdul Samed should be sort of available by around that time. I'm not for a second saying Sunderland don't need to strengthen. I think they absolutely do. I think it's a crucially important window. But in terms of your point there, I think actually, although at the moment it feels really difficult because the squad is too small for the schedule, I think things are going to ease slightly moving forward. So I don't think there's a need to just get any player in. I think it has to be the right player. And I do think that by the time, once Sunday's out the way, the next time Sunderland play in the league, the sort of base of the squad will be a bit stronger. Glenn says, can we expect more experience in the January transfer window or Premier League kids on loan? Hopefully a nice mix of both. Yeah, I think that, Lebris has always said it's about, I don't think they're necessarily looking for experience per se, but what they are definitely looking for is someone who can hit the ground running. We know Sunderland will always potentially sign sort of young players who can impact the team if they're available, a bit like when they signed Mundell last year. Maybe they'll do that, but I think first and foremost, they're looking for players who can compete for players right now. Lebris has said that Chris Mepham is kind of a bit of a template for that, if you like. So to be honest, Glenn, I'm not sure about how experienced necessarily these players will be, although I'm sure that'll be part of it. But I think what we'll definitely see is when Sunderland do recruit, it'll be players who will hopefully be match fit and who are sort of have enough experience of the Championship or the Premier League or whatever it might be to hopefully compete for a place straight away. It does feel like Sunderland are setting a pretty high bar for their recruitment this month. That's obviously high risk because those players are going to be hard to sign and there's going to be a lot of competition for them. But hopefully, yeah, it's players who can immediately impact the team because, as I mentioned, there are some players who you're a little bit nervous about in terms of we haven't seen them much this season, so you're a bit nervous about their recovery. But broadly speaking, the injury picture should look better in the next couple of weeks anyway. So I think it's about adding real high quality who can make the difference in tight games. I think that's got to be the sort of the goal for Sunderland in January. Boots RTG says the low block effective but doesn't help the atmosphere. It's a hard watch to discuss. Yeah, generally speaking, we want to see Sunderland on the front foot. I agree with that completely. I think you have to put last night a little bit into the context in terms of the quality of the opposition. You look at some of the money that they've spent on some of the players on that side, the players that Sunderland were missing. The one thing I will say last night is I don't really mind a low block when Sunderland are as aggressive as they are when they win the ball back. I never really felt at any point that Sunderland weren't trying to score. I thought in their own way they were really, really positive. When Neil and Joe won the ball back, they were trying to find the striker straight away. Mepham was playing a lot of quite risky but also quite positive balls over the top. It wasn't aimless, it was trying to find the runs of Isidore and Mienda. So generally speaking, I totally agree with you. I think a big part of Sunderland's whole kind of strategy is to be aggressive and on the front foot at home, to try and utilise the crowd. It's definitely not something they're always able to do. I don't mind last night because I thought it was a smart game plan in the circumstances, especially when you consider how much football Sunderland have played recently. Really hard to be 100% intensity all the time in this kind of schedule. I thought it was the right setup, and I can always forgive a low block when it's done specifically to help the team score. And I don't feel like Sunderland weren't trying to score last night. I thought they were quite aggressive when they won the ball back. A couple of comments over on YouTube as well, just before I finish. Some boy called, says, great win tonight, so pleased for Meander. Do you think we'll strengthen the window even though players are coming back from injury? Yeah, hopefully I've kind of answered that a little bit. I don't see, because as you say, a lot of players coming back, I don't see tons and tons of business, but Sunderland are definitely looking to do 2 or 3 signings this month, so hopefully they can do it. Tim Hewitt says, so pleased for Meander to play well and score in such a big game. With Meander, Isidore Connolly, Rusin, Abdullahi and Ogunsuyi, can you realistically see us signing another striker? I definitely think Sunderland would like to add an experienced striker if they can this month. I think they recognise the importance of it. Connolly obviously hasn't had a lot of minutes recently. Rusin, I think there has to be a good chance he goes this month because of his lack of game time. So although I agree with you, there are a lot of players up front, I think it's definitely something Sunderland would like to do. And there you go again. I've spoken for 21 minutes, can't help myself. So I'm going to call it there. Thanks so much for all your questions and comments. Brilliant to start the year talking about a Sunderland win. And I will be back after the Portsmouth game. I've been losing all track of days at this time of year. I'll be back after the Portsmouth game on Sunday, so it'll probably be Monday morning. Your edition of On the Whistle will be up, but we'll have our instant reaction from the press box on Sunday evening as well, so you'll be able to watch that over on the Echo website and on YouTube. Thanks for watching.